broadcasting from Los Angeles. I'm joined today by my co-host, Carlos Ponte, just outside of Mexico City. Hi, Carlos. Welcome to the show. And today we have a guest who is the CEO and co-founder of Frameplate, Jonathon Troughton. Welcome to the show, Jonathon. We're looking forward to speaking with you. Let's get started by you introducing yourself. Tell us a little about you and your background. Let the audience get to know you a little bit.
Thanks for that. And thanks for having me on here. I know everybody's getting used to the whole living in a single room for a portion of their life. I guess my background, especially where it comes from, my background comes from a ton of different things. I was very much a jack of all trades, I guess you could say. I didn't start out in the tech space, but then pivoted over to tech and I guess you would say communications. Building retail products, I guess retail chains, all these kinds of things. And then we kept pivoting and doing different things like managed services, businesses, and analytics systems with Wi-Fi. And eventually it pivoted into software development. And I guess when it was a couple of years ago, I mean, should I jump into like a story of how this kind of originated and where it sort of ties into my life? Does that work in this sort of segment?
Yeah, that works. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Just tell us how this led into creating the company you're with now, Frameplate.
Yeah. Let's do it. So I've always been a massive gamer and I've always had, a history of having a passion and a love for this. This goes back to when I was a child. I mean, playing GoldenEye really probably kicked it off in Nintendo 64. That's where the addiction started. But I guess when I was exiting out of the last things I did, and this came up, I actually met my co-founder in PUBG. We were playing PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds. I don't know if you've played this, but that is wildly addictive. And this is back in 2017. And it was funny. We were playing for a while in this game, and there was an event. There used to be a can, and I'm not going to say the brand of who the can was, but this can was, you're always using this can. And so we picked up this can, and you're looking at it constantly, and there's massive amount of hours going into the game. And at one point, the can was removed. Now, it was a cease and desist. It wasn't meant to be in there. And I actually, the co-founder and I, who we've been playing with, we're sitting there looking at it, like, why would you remove this? Like, that's insane. There's a massive amount of time from people that are actually playing this game, looking at this brand all the time. Anyway, so we dove into it and understood the reasons they wanted to remove it. But it really highlighted the point to us that the audience that is actually playing in these game environments now are not really being captivated by advertising in the way that it should. Because if you look at all the methodologies that are currently used for advertising, they're very broken, disruptive. And we saw an opportunity to actually change that and actually get the correct execution of these brands and ads inside these games where it was very complementary. It didn't really break the immersion or the feel for the game developer. But it goes far beyond that, like really giving back to the community that I grew up loving and being around. So, I mean, I don't know how long you want me to go into this, but the opportunity from there, it just opened the doors of the possibilities of advertising in games, especially immersive 3D. Because when you think about gaming now, gaming globally is as diverse as the human race, and it's no longer just a guy or I've heard this comment, stay male and pale. Tends to be the concept of who gamers are, that they're just 15-year-old boys in a basement. But it's not the case.
Now that's an interesting point there. I'm personally interested in learning a little bit more of the demographics, because that's what I think of as a gamer, is a bunch of kids. But I'm hearing it's adults playing it. So let's go into it a little bit. Maybe Carlos could introduce the topic for today and kick off the conversation. We'd love to learn some more.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tulio, and thanks our guest, Jonathon. Jonathon, I believe that we're going to be speaking about building trust and being an agent of change in the in-game advertising space. So that's the topic that you kindly shared with us for this conversation. And in other words, can intrinsic in-game advertising finally allow for true creative control in video game monetization? So the question that I have for you, the initial question is, why did you choose this particular topic, Jonathon? So let's start with that. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So there's two sides of the coin, really. Developers, and especially game developers, there seems to be different categorizations. If you're at the pinnacle of this industry and you're a AAA studio, you're very well funded, making money is not necessarily a hard thing. You tend to drive massive audiences, you've got lots of investment. But it was, I think initially when we got into this, and even now it's such like a focus to us because of the way we like to build the technology. For game developers, it's quite difficult to monetize games. There's a lot of different technology products out there that give them different methodologies, but a lot of them tend to be quite disruptive and break core loop mechanics, break the gameplay feel and experience for the gamer. And that's where we sort of looked at this challenge and said, how can we, as a gamer myself as well, like how can we actually incorporate things or incorporate these ad units into the environments that actually are conducive, that create a very positive experience for the gamer and the brand that's associated with that. But then on the same flip side, how does that work for an advertiser that we can give them all the, I guess you'd say, the expected data and reporting capabilities and analytics that they would get in the current methodologies, but then elevate that to the next level. And then building the technology, the SDK, and everything that goes actually in for the game developers and making it very simple and fluid for them to implement.
So, Jonathon, who decides what kind of advertising content gets presented in the game? Is the game maker, or how does it work? What's the ecosystem look like? I certainly don't know what that looks like. I'm curious to learn how you actually get an ad in front of a gamer. Who decides that? How does that play into what you guys do?
Okay, if you take this from the game developer's perspective, you want to have ad units or ad creative that is actually relative to the environment that they're going in. Now, brands have an amazing opportunity here to create something that is reminiscent of like the 60s, where there was a lot of creativity and a lot of design, and you can actually have some amazing creative going into these spaces. So there's that opportunity that the brand itself, or the game itself, can identify, do I want to have something that's stylized? Is it cartoon stylized? Is it photorealistic? What does my game look like? Is my game going to be only suitable for something that is in a cartoon format? And therefore, if that is the case, the developer, as they're integrating in these SDKs, they can actually highlight the fact that they do want to have only stylized cartoon, or maybe they do permit something that's photorealistic. So the developer has creative control and their ability to actually select the styles of creative that are coming in. And from our side, when we receive creative from advertisers, it's all tagged to actually say this style of creative will be appropriate for these sorts of things. And the platform that we built automatically aligns where those particular creative go to on the fly. So when the request comes through, it's automatically assigning the right creative to that environment.
So is it safe to assume it's similar to an RTB platform, real-time bidding platform for traditional advertising on web and on mobile, where you're providing that insertion capability for the developer? How does it actually, how does it work? If I'm a developer, I'm a game developer, how do I create the space, obviously, the container to produce and present the ad or the content. How do I make this happen? Do I contact you? Do I work through an agency? How does that work?
Yeah, so we did build a self-serve platform, and the platform is available for whether an agency or an advertiser go direct. But we also realize that doesn't necessarily mean how the rest of the business world operates, especially in advertising. Whether they are going through an agency or they do want to do it direct, there's different methodologies. So I think the question you brought up about OpenRTB, it's interesting. I don't personally. I think we're trying to be an agent of change here, like as per the topic. OpenRTB in its current form doesn't necessarily work for games, because you really have to take the considerations of the game environment, who the gamer is, where they are, what the game style is, what the play is like, what everything looks like. So RTB being in its nature, you don't necessarily know what that is. You needed to create something, well, it was what we did. We need to create a capability where we could take programmatic in, or programmatic like, so it's automated in nature. So you still get all the same reporting capabilities. You still get all the information, metrics, brand study, brand lifts, trace through for where the players are actually going, what they're doing, whether that brand got any value, like actually got real value out of the impression from what they had in that experience. So we wanted to build all those capabilities in there. And in doing so, we have to make available all those, I guess, the expected programmatic like capabilities in the back end. So whether they're going through an agency, whether they're going through the platform, it's entirely, I guess, it's up to the advertiser themselves.
So unlike most platforms out there that were designed traditionally for the web and for apps and are being adapted for in-gaming, your platform was created specifically with the gaming business in mind.
Yeah.
So you have a lot more flexibility, built in that serves the needs of developers of games.
Yeah, it was a different approach. We didn't come from it from a purely marketing approach. We didn't come from just a solid marketing background, and we brought some fantastic talent in and fantastic people who have joined our team, which really builds out our capability and understanding of the space in a way that I have put it this way, I have a totally different understanding of the space now from when I started. But at the core and DNA of this, we built this from the game perspective, the game developer perspective, the gamer perspective. So who does this actually resonate with? Who are your clientele that you're trying to understand? Who are you trying to give them a message and actually get them to do something? That's the perspective that we originally attacked this from. And from doing it that way, we've really been able to, I guess, take the creativity and the ability to take the full creative control and full creativity and put it back into the developer's hands. Unlike in the past where you're sort of saying, I want to have a banner or an interstitial or something like this, and it must be in these locations for your game for us to be able to monetize. Well, we flip that around, and with the data and telemetry that we're actually collecting in these environments, we can give that full creative control back to the developer and say, what did you want to build? Like, how did you envisage this game going? Now, keep in mind that we do have some creative, I guess you'd say, constraints, but we try and listen to the developer, like what is actually needed, what would make your job easier, how can we best build our product to suit your creative flow, your creative needs, and your game design needs.
This is very interesting, the point that you've made out. In traditional advertising, you have to set aside the space and the formats and in order to serve the advertisement. So what I'm hearing is similar to how Hollywood does product placement advertisement, right? Where they pay a license or fee to be able to show your product. Someone's drinking a soda, for example, with a particular brand soda, and very interestingly shows the brand as they take a sip, right? That's a product placement. They paid that company's paying for that. Is this similar strategy in terms of gaming, and is it flexible depending on the particular player? Like, someone who's playing a game be in an age group that's different than someone else. Can I show a different
100%.
ad? Like,
yeah.
So how does that work?
It's complete. It's targeted within reasons. Obviously, there's regulation around COPA and so forth, which there is elements that you can't target. But I wouldn't necessarily liken it to product placement. Now, there's lessons of the past that need to definitely be listened to, especially if you look at Massive or Double Fusion or anything like this. This is not a new concept. It's just we live in a different time where the technology is able to support these requirements. The culture that exists is now listening and adopting. And as I mentioned before, the average gamer is as diverse as humanity itself now. Like, this is no longer a 15-year-old boy. It's the average age is 34. So we definitely live in a different time. We're able to execute on this. But going back to that comment about, is it like Hollywood? Is it like product placement? Yes and no. It can. It basically has the effect of Hollywood, where it's the feel of product placement. So it's very incorporated into the environment. I dare say I don't want to make it as conspicuous as some of the placements that they have, but the actual core of what we're doing, we want to make it scalable. We don't want to be doing everything custom, where every single thing leads to a massive amount of work. The developer doesn't get the returns that they would like to see from that amount of work, and it fizzles out in a couple of years, which has happened in the past. So we're definitely looking at the lessons that have happened from the past and the past people who have tried this, because very smart people tried as well. But this needs to be made scalable. It needs to be made extremely simple. It needs to be made quick and easy for these developers to actually implement and see how this works.
I got a question, if I may, Tulio. And my question, Jonathon, my question is driven more by curiosity, because I got to confess that pertaining to games, I'm a little bit on the agnostic side. I think my 8-year-old knows so much more about games than I could possibly know by now. But I see that games are a big thing. Gaming in general is a big thing. I remember that every time that someone joins us at Nearsoft and they introduce themselves to the company, they usually do this on a monthly basis. And so every time someone comes in, the first thing they say is, "Oh, and I'm an avid gamer." It's like something that defines the personality across the board. So, but I don't know much about this. So my question is this. I'm curious if, from what I'm reading here and what I'm listening, the in-game advertising space and the topic that we're talking about today is more geared towards monetization, the game development, the development companies. So it's more on the business side. What about the user side or the gamer side? How do they normally react to the fact that they're actually seeing or watching advertising on their games and all that? How do you deal with adoption of these practices among the gaming advertising community? So I'm just curious about how we can go about this to make it seamless.
Yeah, well, that can be answered in a very technical manner. And that's the, I guess, the approach that we took from the start. Like I mentioned earlier, we didn't take this straight from a marketer's perspective. We weren't just taking standard IAB assets and trying to push them into these environments. We really looked at what the requirements were. As a gamer, what do I expect? And therefore, our requirements to make sure we maintain that experience for a gamer, to make sure that they don't adversely react to seeing something that is clearly a web asset that's just being pushed into a game environment, and people are just trying to cut corners to actually get something running quickly. We really wanted to think, what's the core required technology that will give you the experience that you just mentioned? It will actually make it feel seamless and not damage the experience entirely. So when we thought about that and we actually execute this now in a way and we implement in a game, the experience that people have is very positive. It's complementary. It actually adds to the, I guess you'd say, the realism or the effect that the experience that they're actually having, because in some games you want to add the realism. In some games, where even if it's cartoon stylized, if you have pieces of ad creative, say in an open world environment or in a city or in a sports arena, it actually makes sense. People expect this stuff to be there. If it's not there, they tend to feel like it's lacking an element or a component of the game, which makes it feel less enjoyable. So yeah, it was definitely in the onset that when we went into this, we knew that the current standards and the current advertising standards, we can't ignore, obviously, all the requirements that the companies have, that they need the data. The data is the most important part here. They actually have to back up the investment that they're putting into the space and make sure they can get a return on that. So we needed the data, but you're never going to go anywhere if you don't get acceptance from the audience, if you don't get acceptance from the game developers. And it's about building trust. Like, you have to build trust with them that you didn't just take the existing ad model that's been around for 15 years and try and push it into games because you thought games were sexy. It's not. Like, you need to understand where, I guess, everybody in the space who really loves it and the reason why you go on and why the average time people are spending is 6 hours a week on a gaming device. You do it because it brings enjoyment. There's a love, there's a passion to it. So when we're going into it, we totally took the different approach. We did not want to just take something off the shelf. We really wanted to create change in the space. We wanted to build the technology that's appropriate for this, that actually is going to maintain it. The last thing I want to see is games end up like the web, with just you being bombarded constantly, and it's a very negative experience. And brands don't want to be associated to a negative experience. So how do we do this right?
So speaking of brands, Jonathon, I'm curious to learn, are there particular verticals that are showing more interest in gaming advertising than others? Are there some that are not jumping in that that are missing an opportunity?
Yeah.
That's been your experience so far in terms of who's playing in terms of as a brand?
Look, for brands, this applies for all brands. Like, across the board, there's very easily seamless ways of getting these things and the creative types that come into our environment for all brands. One that I'd say is pharma, but to be honest, like, it would be weird having a few disclaimers going for a while after you're playing games. So maybe we'll work out a way to do that. But at the moment, whether it's CPG, if it's any services, I mean, travel obviously would be normally something that would be a thing, but now, unfortunately, because of COVID, we're not seeing that. But it really suits all all verticals. There's no one vertical that we've noticed that does this more than others. On contrast, though, relative to the games where we see this appropriate, there is some particular verticals that we see that really this suits better. So whether it be sports, whether it be first-person shooters or racing games or a lot of casual games that are open, that makes sense. Where it doesn't make sense is Candy Crush. And we mean what we say. When we went into this, we didn't want to create a product that is just, a mash of some other technology and a mash of the basic ad tech in web that we're pushing in here. We really wanted to build a tech that captivates the imagination of the game developer and just really doesn't break the experience for the gamer.
There's Carlos, I think you might have some questions. I have one more quickly about the product marketplace landscape. Sure. There are some companies out there. We actually had a guest about a year ago, Ultra, that are empowering developers to actually develop games, put them in the marketplace directly. So they're eliminating the middleman, if you will, which is very timely because a lot of the developers don't get the lion's share of the effort they've put into the game. So I'm curious, is there a marketplace for some of these independent developers that are putting games out there to leverage this better because they can do more customization, more creative type of approaches? Are you getting more traction with those, or the traditional big, gamers like Activision, etc.? Where are you seeing the most traction?
Okay, so we never built this just to be a revenue source for Activision or EA or something like this. This, from the onset, was meant to be for everybody. We wanted to give the capabilities to monetize in this manner to indie developers, students. We wanted to give, but also still, you're going to the AAA studios. Now, obviously, building the technology that you can make it scalable across all those areas has been a bit of a challenge, and especially when you incorporate all the things that are just foundational, whether it's Google Campaign Manager or the ability to link this into Nielsen. Like this is foundational. So when we were building the tech for these developers, we were thinking, what are they going to need down the road? Because it's all very well to get this out of the gate and have something, a test campaign showing. But how do you get this to Evergreen where it's actually continuously feeding back into itself? And we really wanted to think about that from all stages of developers and not just the big ones. So for us, it is large studios, it is small studios. We were actually heavily engaged with education as well prior to COVID, but unfortunately, it's another one of the victims of that, is that a lot of the education partners and schools have been closed and pivoting to an online only, even though for us, we've been able to function very easily because we have a distributed team in multiple countries. That's been easy, but for education, they haven't, that's not how they learned. So it was a lot for them to take on at that time.
Yeah, so Jonathan, you've obviously brought on board some giants from the advertising industry. We met through Carrie, who was the Chief Innovation Officer at Group M, heavyweight individuals. How did you go about doing that? Tell us a little bit about your culture as a business. It sounds as though you're very focused on innovation, creativity. What's the sort of thing that makes folks want to join you to be part of this movement, if you will?
Look, in the end, in my dead honest opinion, I think it's just being true and honest about your vision, your mission, why you're doing it. You're not trying to cut corners. You are trying to do something hard. Like we realize what we're doing here, it deviates outside of what the simple tick box is. But I mean, you mentioned Carrie. Carrie is fantastic. She is a genius. And I am very lucky that I guess my vision was something that she could believe in, because I don't want to build a product here just to rip a few dollars out of people and wreck an industry I love. And I think she saw that this is something that I really loved. But at the end of the day, making our clients or our game developers successful, or seeing them succeed, is seeing ourselves succeed. Because obviously, especially our model, the way we bill, is intertwined. So when I'm talking to Carrie especially, and there's difficult challenges every day that we to go about, and how we're going to incorporate some of the existing expectations in this industry, she's fantastic in navigating that. And I guess my sort of approach of making sure that we're looking out for developers, but also in the same sense, looking out for the advertisers and the corporations that are investing in us by using the platform, making sure that their investment's not wasted, because it's very easy, I find, in technology that you can, in effect, cover up the effectiveness of this. It's like, provide real value, show them why this is important, give them the data and expectations, but also you've got to be able to say, at points like, no, what you're suggesting there won't resonate with the environment. You need to listen to what they're talking about. If you want to be a player in this space, you need to. I mean, gaming itself, what is it? 2.8 billion players who are playing. Like, we're talking enormous hours per week, like billions of hours per week. And it's when people sort of say to me like, oh, but what about esports? Esports thing. I'm not saying no to esports. Esports is definitely a thing. It's not going away. It is only going to grow, but relatively, please don't look at us, and please don't look at the technology that we're actually putting out as being esports, because they are massively different things. They have the audience and the size of esports is not even comparable to gaming. So as a whole.
Well, Jonathan, it's been great to have you. It sounds to me like you're very focused on balancing the needs of the end user, the player, creating a great experience for them, and creating value for the developers, and also the advertisers, to be able to reach them in novel and interesting ways that doesn't seem like an intrusion on the end user. Ultimately, it's all about the end user, right? That's something I've taken to heart by the previous folks like Steve Jobs, who was obsessed with the end user, and we know what the results were from that. So congratulations for doing that. Just as we quickly wrap up here, any words of wisdom for any entrepreneur who's sitting on the fence about doing something that they're passionate about and turning it into a business? Any words of wisdom for them?
God, it's never going to be as easy as you think it's going to be. It doesn't matter how good your plan is. But whenever you actually execute on it, there's always curveballs. But you have to try. And you actually have to just jump in wholeheartedly. you're definitely listening to the advice of people who have been in the industries or different associated sectors. You got to listen to that. But at core, you have to really believe where you're going and understand what being realistic to yourself. But you have to believe and push, because you're going to have so many different voices and opinions that are pushing you towards the easier path and pushing you towards, if we did this, we can just get a quick dollar here. It'll look great for investors. But down the road, that's not going to be good, because you're ultimately going to betray your core concept, and you could end up betraying a customer and have no customers at all. So at some point, you have to listen to yourself and stay, I guess, true to what you were really trying to achieve. But just in the end, just be good to people. And if you be good to people, I tend to find that you find good people.
Great words of advice. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's been a pleasure to have you, Jonathan. Carlos, I know we've got another week. We're done for the week.
Yeah.
We had a guest almost every day. Yes. Monday, we have the recap show at 1 p.m. Pacific. We're going to recap 3 shows. We're going to try to get that done in 10 minutes.
I think we're going to
make that happen. We'll see if we can. And then what else have we got next week, Carlos?
Sure, Tulio. Thank you. Well, next week we have 3 days in a row full of great interviews with tech luminaries. And on Tuesday, we're going to be speaking with Mr. James Cohen from, I hope I pronounced it right, Cohen, the CEO and founder of Nevon. And Nevon is, what it is a technologically advanced online platform for the healthcare education sector. Then on Wednesday, we're going to be speaking, well, let's see who we're going to be speaking with. I got it right here. We're going to be speaking with Reed Blackman, also one of the principals of Virtue Consultants. And this is a company that deals with risk analysis in the digital transformation sector. So this should be interesting. And finally, we're going to be speaking on Thursday. Let's see who we have on Thursday, Tulio. Okay, Thursday, we're going to be speaking with our guest from yesterday, from Speak to Leads, Sammy James, who is from San Diego, from Speak to Leads. And that's where I don't have the topics yet, Tulio, to be honest, because the guests haven't sent them over to me, but should be interesting as ever. And that's going to be at 1 p.m. Pacific, right here on DojoLIVE. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Stay safe, everyone. Hang on just a minute, Jonathan. Thank you.